When the elderly woman walked into the restaurant alone, nobody noticed her. When she asked for a table for two, a few people quietly stared. When the second chair stayed empty, whispers began. But by the end of that night, no one in the room would ever forget her name. The reservation that changed everything. The restaurant was one of those places where conversations were soft and the lights were lower than necessary. Crystal glasses reflected golden light. A pianist in the corner played old jazz standards that floated gently across the room. It was the kind of restaurant where people celebrated promotions, anniversaries, and sometimes endings. Emily Carter, 27 years old, adjusted her apron and checked table 12 again. She had been working double shifts for 3 weeks. Rent in Boston was unforgiving, and her younger brother's college tuition bill sat folded inside her locker as a constant reminder that she could not afford to slow down. Emily had learned to read people quickly. The nervous first date, the overconfident businessman, the tired mother who just wanted one quiet meal. Working in fine dining was less about food and more about emotion. People came here to feel something. At exactly 7:15, the door opened. An elderly woman stepped inside. She looked about 70. Her silver hair was neatly tied back. She wore a navy blue coat that had clearly been expensive once, though time had softened the fabric. She carried herself with quiet dignity, the kind that does not demand attention, but earns it anyway. The host smiled politely. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," she replied. "Margaret Hayes, table for two." The host glanced at the screen and nodded. "Right, this way." Emily happened to be assigned to table 16 by the window. She approached with menus in hand and her practiced warm smile. "Good evening. My name is Emily. I will be taking care of you tonight." Margaret smiled back. "Thank you, dear." Emily placed 2 menus down automatically, then paused for a fraction of a second. The second chair remained empty. "Will someone be joining you, ma'am?" "Yes," Margaret said gently. "He is running a little late." There was something in her tone that made Emily nod without further question. She poured water into both glasses. 20 minutes passed. The restaurant filled with quiet laughter and the soft clinking of cutlery. Couples leaned across tables. Friends raised glasses of wine. Table 16 remained half empty. Emily returned. "Would you like to order while you wait?" Margaret looked at the empty seat across from her. "I think I will." She ordered 2 entrees, a filet mignon, medium rare, and the herb-roasted salmon. Emily wrote it down, then hesitated. "Would you like both served at the same time?" she asked. "Yes, please," was the reply. When Emily walked back toward the kitchen, one of the younger servers whispered, "Is her date invisible?" Emily ignored the comment. Food arrived. Emily placed the steak in front of the empty chair, and the salmon in front of Margaret. Margaret folded her hands for a moment before picking up her fork. She occasionally glanced up, as if listening. Emily noticed something else. Margaret was not checking her phone. She was not looking toward the door anxiously. She was simply present. Halfway through the meal, Emily approached again. "Is everything all right?" Margaret looked up with soft eyes. "Thank you for not rushing me." Something in those words made Emily pull out the empty chair slightly and adjust the napkin on the untouched plate. The steak remained untouched. After 40 minutes, Emily gently asked, "Would you like me to wrap this for you?" Margaret inhaled slowly. "No, leave it there." The pianist began playing an old love song from the 1970s. Margaret closed her eyes. "Today would have been our 50th anniversary," she said quietly. Emily did not interrupt. "We came here on our first anniversary, back when this place had red carpets and terrible wallpaper." She gave a small laugh. "He proposed to me again, right at this table, on our 25th. Said he wanted to make sure I would still say yes." Emily felt her throat tighten. "He passed away last February." The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade. I promised him I would not let this table feel empty. Emily swallowed. You kept the reservation? Yes. For two? Yes. Emily stood still for a moment, unsure of what to say. Finally she asked, Would you like me to light a candle? Margaret smiled. I would love that. Emily hurried to the kitchen and found a small candle usually used for birthdays. She placed it gently between the two plates and lit it. Margaret's eyes reflected the flame. Across the room, a few guests had begun to understand. Emily stepped away to give her privacy. 15 minutes later, Margaret signaled for the check. Emily picked it up from the printer and stared at the total. The steak, the salmon, wine, dessert, Margaret had barely touched. Without allowing herself time to reconsider, Emily removed the steak from the bill and swiped her own card for it. She returned to the table. Ma'am, your total is right here. Margaret glanced at the receipt. This seems lower than I expected. We had a small kitchen delay earlier, Emily lied softly. The second entree is complimentary tonight. Margaret studied her for a long second. That is very kind. Emily shook her head. It is just dinner. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small photograph. It showed a young couple sitting at the same window table decades earlier. The man had thick dark hair and a wide, confident smile. Margaret looked radiant beside him. We built our life from nothing, she said. He worked construction. I taught music. We never had much, but we always had Friday nights. Emily looked at the empty chair. Margaret placed the photograph beside the untouched steak. He would have liked you. Emily felt tears press against her eyes, but blinked them back. After signing the receipt, Margaret stood slowly. Emily instinctively moved to help her with her coat. Thank you for tonight, Margaret said. You are welcome. As Margaret walked toward the exit, the pianist shifted songs without being asked. The melody softened into something tender and familiar. Several guests at nearby tables quietly clapped once, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Margaret paused at the door and turned back. You gave me one more anniversary, she said. Then she left. Emily cleared the table carefully. She wrapped the untouched steak and hesitated. Then she placed it in a box along with a slice of cake and rushed outside. Margaret was standing by the curb, waiting for a taxi. Ma'am? Margaret turned. You forgot this. Emily handed her the box. Margaret looked inside and then back at Emily. You did not have to do this. I know. Margaret's voice trembled. Loneliness is the heaviest thing at my age. Emily stepped closer. Not tonight. Margaret reached into her purse once more and removed a small envelope. Please open this after your shift. Before Emily could respond, a taxi pulled up. Margaret got in and was gone. The rest of the night passed in a blur. At midnight, Emily finally opened the envelope in the staff room. Inside was a handwritten letter. Emily, if you are reading this, then you are exactly who I hoped you were. My husband and I were the original owners of this building before it was sold 20 years ago. Tonight was not a test. It was a memory. But kindness like yours deserves more than a thank you. Enclosed is a contact number for my attorney. I fund a small scholarship every year in my husband's name, for someone who understands that service is not about plates, but about people. Call him. Margaret Hayes. A smaller check slipped out of the envelope. It was enough to cover her brother's entire semester tuition. Emily sat down hard. The next morning, the restaurant manager called a staff meeting. Word had spread among guests who had posted about the anniversary table online. Comments flooded in about the young waitress who treated love with respect. Within weeks, the restaurant added a permanent option to its menu: the anniversary table. Any guest dining in memory of a loved one would receive a complimentary second setting. No questions asked. Emily never saw Margaret again, But every Friday at 7:15, she reserved table 16 for two. And sometimes when the candle flickered between two plates, other guests would lower their voices. They would hold hands tighter. They would remember someone. Because one elderly woman refused to let a chair stay empty. And one waitress understood that sometimes the most important person at the table is the one you cannot see.